Hello, my name is Nathaniel, and this is Impact 2021, our continuing conversation where we talk about issues such as religion, such as social issues, such as anything that comes to your mind. And I say anything that comes to your mind because this is a conversation, and this is a conversation that we have back and forth. Make sure that you type in your questions and your comments into the comment section if there's anything that you want to discuss as we go along this conversation. So let's just hop right into it. If you've been with us recently, you know that we've been really kind of hammering down and talking about the role of the church. And not the role of the church just in general, but the role of the church not on Sundays, but Monday through Friday, or Monday through Saturday, I guess, to be more specific. And so what I have this week is that we brought in a person who's just going to represent, I guess, everybody, the common man's position on this. And we're just going to discuss a couple of issues and where we feel that the role of the church should be. How involved should the church get into your Monday through Saturday? And so we have Chris here. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you.
All right, Chris. Well, basically, just as a summation, what we talked about is the role of the church on the weekdays. Because we know on Sunday, there's plenty of people who go to church on Sunday, they get really holy. But then on Monday through Saturday, during the rest of the week, the participation there or church really doesn't come with them. Their religion doesn't come with them. It stays on Sunday, usually during service. And for some folk, it's gone as soon as service is over. But there's others who want to take their religion with them all through the week. The question that we've been asking primarily is how much participation should the church have during the week? And so when we look at the landscape of what's happened in the last year, when we look at the landscape of when we're talking about different issues, voting rights, when we're talking about race relations, when we're talking about protests, when we're talking about social issues, when we're talking about politics, how much do you want the actual church to come in and make comments and participate in daily lives? Just in a general sense, how much do you think the church should really participate as far as putting their nose in day-to-day business?
Well, really, I think it's showtime for the church. This is an opportunity for the church, especially the Black church. This is the opportunity for them to, demonstrate demonstrate the power and how, their faith can, really impact a society. And I don't think we've seen it as much as we would like to see it, but this is in times like this is when the church is actually should be in the forefront. This is how you get to show the people that, what you preach is what you do versus, just having that, like you said, that Sunday church mentality. So I think the church has a large role, always has a large role, but especially when we have situations where, it seems to be chaotic, and people really don't know what to do. This is the opportunity for the church to kind of step up. So this is like the playoffs for the church.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that the weird part is as I kind of sat back and I looked at what different groups were saying, it plays both ways. What's really weird is that you'll sit back and you'll think that one particular group, give you an example, that one particular group is going to really be active and another group is not going to be active. And when I say those particular groups, I'm saying when you look at someone who's more a liberal-minded thinker, who is looking to progress the church, you would say, well, they're the ones who want to be really socially active and make sure that they talk to the culture. But then you look at the opposite side, someone who is really more conservative in thought and wants to be more traditionalist in how the church should be. It appears that they're just as active as wanting to be involved in social issues or be involved in making sure they speak to the culture. And so you have both groups wanting to talk to the culture. It's not like you have one side that says, hey, let's be out there, participate. you have both groups saying, for example, the people who want to push, let's say, abortion, they are out there, want to be involved in the world and in everybody's business. And at the same time, you'll have people on the opposite end who are saying, no, the church shouldn't be out there and in your personal business. But then you'll turn around, you'll have the group who are doing race relations, who will say, all right, as a church, we need to be out there making sure that all races are represented. We need to be in their business, be in the business of making sure that all races are represented. And you'll have another group who'll sit back and say, nah, church really doesn't need to be out there on those issues. We need to stick to what we know, which is just saving souls. Where do you come down on that? Because it's weird, because both groups, whether you're a traditionalist, more conservative, or whether you're liberal and more open to different things, both groups will sit back and say, we need to be out there. But at the same time, they'll say that other group doesn't need to be out there. You see the complexity of what I'm getting at? Where do you kind of come in on that one? Because I know that's really hard to kind of look at.
Well, it really is like, a lot of these issues are, double-edged swords. Even with the Black lives, even, down to some of the racial issues within the Black church, there's some division about tactics and how to approach the issue. I mean, you're going to always have people that, that disagree, but the church is supposed to be promoting social justice, right? Not individualized or, not pushing political agendas, not pushing politics, not pushing economic issues, but pushing social justice. What is right? I mean, the message of Jesus, from my perspective, was all about how do we make everybody a part of the family? And whether it doesn't matter whether you're a Southern Baptist, whether you are Black Baptist, Catholic, Methodist, they all teach or should be teaching the social justice angle from the perspective of Jesus. And so if the church is not united on the message of Jesus, it's going to be hard for people to follow the church. And I think that's where we are now. It's very divisive, and we got a lot of different angles coming from the same perspective, and it makes things kind of complicated, and some people don't know which way to go. And so that's when you see politicians and people that are coming, people trying to build their own platform off of the division that a lot of churches have. And
and I think
it diminishes the influence of the church.
Yeah, and you've gone right into where we're going. So for everyone who doesn't know, I'm going to tee up exactly what's been going on lately. There's been a couple of different stories that we're going to touch on. One is the Southern Baptist Convention. For those of you who don't know, that's one of the largest Christian conventions, Christian organizations in the United States. So the Southern Baptist Convention of Baptist churches, we'll say majority of the churches are white churches or white-led churches. They've been having their annual convention, and this year they had a lot of topics to discuss. Critical race theory was one of the ones that they were really getting into, but they were having the election of their president. And one of the concerns was that a lot of the minority churches or minority-led churches were considering leaving. And, because one, they were ignoring race issues. They were saying critical race theory wasn't a thing. There was not a push to see, is there a problem with race in the church and just in society as a whole, and if we should look and examine it. They didn't, there are certain people who don't want to examine it. And the convention was going more conservative in the sense of it was being more socially active. It was being more political. And so the election was a tight election, and the person who won was the Alabama pastor. His name was Ed Litton, I want to say his name is. And the comments that were made was that he was the only one out of the people who were running, which was going to be able to stop the exodus of the minority churches. Because his thing was to, let's get back to talking about the church, talking about saving souls, talking about Christian principles, and let's get away from some more of the political conversation where people are doing the social aspect, abortion, LGBTQ rights, trying to be restrictive to women's participation in the church and leadership in the church. So getting away from those issues, getting away from politics as a whole, supporting or saying that all Christians have to support a particular party or person, and moving into the area of, let's just talk about church. Let's just talk about God. Let's talk about bringing souls in. And so that's where that convention ended up going on. They got with the guy who wants to move away from the social politics. And it was a very close race. But you see there, the issue with the Southern Baptist one is, yes, it may have stemmed the tide of Black people leaving because now they're not going to ignore race issues. But you still have the issue of what happens when race issues happen. Do we do something about it, or do we just ignore it because we're the church and all we're supposed to be doing is talking about Jesus Christ? So what do you think about when you hear about that? When you hear about the Southern Baptists actually moving towards getting away from, let's be more frank, getting away from being, all right, whatever the Republican Party tells us to do, that's what we got to do because we're a conservative group. We're being obsessive with abortion and LGBTQ, and obsessive with making sure that women don't get any kind of leadership positions. And let's move away from that and kind of get more into the Bible. What do you think about that kind of move by this organization?
Well, I think what we see in society in general is that we got a lot of a confusion between social justice and politics. Like we see they're kind of meshed in together. Your political ideas and social justice are not the same. Social justice should be at the forefront of any kind of religious or Christian-based action within the community. Because the whole message of Jesus was about social justice, specifically for the Jews in the Roman Empire, but that was what they were doing. I think that moving away from politics is the best thing, but if you move away from politics and you just go sit in the church and you talk about the goodness of God in the church, you're not really following the mission that Jesus assigned the church to fulfill. So good, get the politics out, but you got to stick to the script. You have to address the issues of race. You have to address the gender issues. You have to address the mistreatment of people because of their sexual orientation. Those are things that need to be addressed. The church, and like I said, this is the church's time to shine. Mm-hmm. Because there's so many social justice issues that are continuously being brought up. The church has to take a stand on police brutality. Mm-hmm. The church has to take a stand on what they call critical race theory, or the notion of white supremacy. These are things that the church can shed light on and, expose and help, bring some much needed change. And so I applaud getting away from the politics, but getting away from the politics doesn't mean you go inside and close the doors.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting point because it does seem like that's more of, where some groups are going. I know you've heard, just like I've heard people say, let's, the common theme, let's keep politics out of the pulpit. do you want to hear? Do you get uncomfortable when you hear a preacher, a pastor, a minister talk about a politician? How do you feel about that? Is that okay? If you're sitting there you're sitting there at a service, or you're sitting there at a Bible study, and all of a sudden it's like, look, let's be real, let's be frank. Such and such politician doing this is not in line with Christian values.
I'm on the show. I'll be back in a second. All right. I mean, I think it's cool. I mean, if you know, it's difficult to separate the politics from our everyday lives now. It's just such a complicated thing to do. But I don't have a problem. I mean, I think some of these discussions need to be had, but I don't think that it's the church's. It serves in the church's best interest to push a political agenda, because the church already has an agenda. It's already been written out. And so, you know, the role of the clergy and, our pastors is to help interpret what that message is for our generation, for the times that we're in now. And so, I mean, it's unavoidable. Like, you know, we just had 4 years of a very interesting gentleman that was our president, and he always gave us things to talk about, you know, but at the same time, there were a lot of social justice issues that came up because of his, you know, while he was in office. So I don't think, and it's the same with, you know, our current president, you know, they're just social justice issues that are coming up all of the time. So I think when it comes to social justice issues, the president, the Congress, all of these politicians we need to discuss their platforms. We need to discuss their agendas, and we need to compare their agendas to the agendas that we have, you know, set for us. So we need to have those conversations, because if you don't get it from the perspective of your church and of your faith, you know, and you just take other people's perspectives, you know, you may end up being swayed in a direction that doesn't work for you.
Makes sense. Yeah, we got a comment that fits right along with what you're saying. It's saying your faith should inform every area and every aspect of your life, which is right on line. Also, don't confuse politics with moral issues. The church is not called to be political, but it's called to be moral. I think that's a good point, in the sense of, you know what, the Bible is not that complex. I mean, basically, once you've read it, you see what you're supposed to do. So if you're not talking about what's going on right now in your day-to-day life and how what the Bible says applies to your current life, then what are you talking about? So if you're saying we don't want to talk about current issues, we don't want to talk about what's going on in society, well, then what do you need to go to church for? Because at that point, you clearly can see what the Word of God says. You can hear what the Word of God says as far as how you should act. But the discussion should be, how does this now apply to our current situation? How does what's in the Bible apply to, you know, the movement of people of color to get rights? How does it apply to the movement of when people are coming from the border looking for saving from their situation? How does it apply to when we're looking at people who, you know, the poor, or we're talking about people of different orientations, whether it be how they see themselves physically, or who they want to be with, and things like that. So if you're not applying what the Bible is to today, then what, you know, it's not that complex. You know, don't kill, don't steal, like, you know, don't covet. But if you're not applying it to current situations, then what are you doing? I mean,
because you can hear Bible stories you can go home and look at Bible stories on Netflix. I mean, there's no point. I mean, there's no point in just going to church. If the point of going to church is to learn the stories in the Bible, man, they got DVDs and all kinds of stuff that'll tell you the stories. But being within the community and having a centralized idea on how we're going to move forward on these issues, I think that's more important.
Right. It's the application of it in current society. So the next big story that really came up was the U.S. Catholic bishops. They voted on Friday, this past Friday. At about 70% of them voted to deny politicians the Eucharist or deny them communion based on their political views towards abortion. So the bishops voted overwhelmingly, 70%, that they can deny politicians, communion. That's a big thing. I know that we're not Catholic, but it's a huge thing in the Catholic Church. And so, and that's going against what the Pope, their leader, even said. He warned on two ways. One, don't use communion as a weapon. And he also warned the U.S. bishops to stop, in the way that I'll break it down in the way that's better said, to stop being obsessed with these social agenda items, like abortion, even though they call it a grave, one of the grave sins, but not to be obsessed with that. And so you have the U.S. bishops, the U.S. Catholic bishops, not listening to the Pope and deciding their own thing. But that is the church stepping into the social realm. What we say that the church should do. But we don't even need to debate that. We clearly know that's incorrect. That's wrong. What they're doing. So how do we address that kind of thing? Again, we're not Catholic, so that's not our thing to do. But when the church steps into some social issues, but they're clearly wrong. When you have leaders stepping into some issues, but they're clearly wrong, they're doing it for political reasons.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a political reason. Like my faith and my understanding of Christianity is that if others are harmed by the promotion of your ideas, it's a sin against the community, and it's a sin against the community, it's a sin against God. Mm-hmm. And so if you have an agenda that's political and it goes against a large percentage of the people that you're there to basically to protect and to teach, you need to be removed. You cannot promote political ideas at the expense of your parishioners. It's just, and then you break with the leadership of the Pope. This is almost like a reformation. This is, this happened hundreds of years ago when Martin Luther walked away from the church because he didn't like what the church was doing. So, we just got we're just so politically charged now, and even when you got, church officials starting to jump in on political issues and now you got divisions within the Catholic Church on stuff. It's just crazy, man.
It is. It's a weird place to be. Yeah. Now, I'm going to say something. This is my opinion. This is not the opinion of, you, and this is not the opinion of my church, but I'm going to say this, and then we'll get back to it. Clearly, if you look at what's going on with that Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church as a whole, they've decided that abortion is a grave sin. It's a grave issue. It's so important. And I believe that it is a bunch of men, old men, who have decided that something that only really you can punish women for, that's going to be the grave sin. But something that you would punish men for, no, let's not look at none of that. Let's not look at all of the
pedophilia
who touched all of these little boys and turned them away from Christ. Let's not look at, issues of rape and issues of molestation. Let's not look at anything that a man can do. Let's only look at the stuff that women can do. And so, what I don't understand, what befuddles me to all ends, is that Catholic women and if anyone is listening who's a Catholic woman, I don't understand how you don't see this, how you don't see the hypocrisy of what's going on. That it's just a bunch of men who are deciding that, hey, let's beat up on women. Like, let's make what women do a sin, and let's ignore what men do. They have not said that all of these leaders, clergy who have sexually assaulted people, that's a grave sin. That's not a grave sin. That's not something that we should concentrate on. Man, let's just concentrate on this abortion thing, because at the end of the day, hey man, all we're gonna be able to do is we can be able to tell some women that they're terrible.
Yeah, and I can't say this with any, and you're 100% on point with that. 100% on point with that. But I think the biggest thing that we really got to address, the reason there are the political motivations come from are money based. I mean, you choose a side because somebody's going to, you pick sides based on your economic interest. And so apparently the Catholic Church has some economic interest in getting support of anti-abortion legislation, because it always kind of messed me up when you talk about abortion, is that the people that are most against it are also the people that are most against putting money into helping support women that are struggling with supporting their children. You know, these are the people that don't want to put money into schools. They don't want to put money into they don't want the government to fund public child care, and they're also against healthcare legislation to help people get the healthcare that they need. So the people that are most against abortion are also the ones that are most against all of the things that would help support raising a child. And so it's like a real backward situation that we're always dealing with. And
that's a very good point. I think, and especially when you get outside of the Catholic Church, because I'll give the Catholic Church credit, because you know that they establish a bunch of foster care organizations. They do a bunch of like feeding and a bunch of schools. And I'll give it to them on that. And so for their hypocrisy that they touch in on being obsessed with abortion, but not being obsessed with what men are doing to these individuals, these young boys. I'll say, but you get outside of that, you get in these other organizations, you get into some of these other so-called Christian organizations who are obsessed with abortion, but they're not doing anything. Like what you're saying, they are against putting food on people's tables, putting money in people's pockets, making sure that people can raise children. So yeah, I think you're right on point with that. We're going to touch one more thing, one more social issue, and then we're going to get out of here. And I hope everybody can see that it's complex, because on one hand, every church wants to get involved with social issues, and everybody's going to be. Some of those social issues, the church is right. Some of the social issues, they're wrong, and so it's complex. It's a little bit more complex. So what just happened this week was that the first ever NFL player came out as gay, active NFL player. We've had NFL players come out after they retired as gay, or we've had one that came out before he tried to get into the NFL, but he, at the end of the day, he wasn't good enough to play. But this is the first one who's actually been playing who came out as gay. His name is Carl Nasty, Las Vegas Raiders, and he came out as gay. I want to say, and I'll make my comment, which is, it's not a big story. It hasn't been a big deal. It has been. All of a sudden, he has a number one selling jersey, but at the end of the day, it hasn't been like this huge story that you thought it would be. Like, this is the most macho sport. This guy came out as gay. Blah 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 blah. Hadn't been a big story. It's been a okay story. People are still more involved in what's going on in the NBA playoffs than they are with the fact that this guy came out as gay. Mm-hmm. So I say that may be a sign that, I look at it as a good sign. There was a time when men had earrings and that was a big deal. Now men have earrings and no one cares because that means it's now been not a big deal. So I look at it as that. But just in the scope of things, in the scope of what what do you feel about the fact that in the most macho sport now we have someone who has come out as gay, and then should the church have a response to this particular thing when we're talking about social issues and the church getting involved?
I mean, well, salute to the man for being brave enough to come out. I mean, he's not only did he come out to his, to just his team and to football fan, he came out to the entire world. So that's a very, in a society where being openly gay is looked down upon, to come out like that is a big thing. So I know he's got a lot of pressure off of his back now, but he's not the only gay NFL player. Mm-hmm. There are what are there? What are there? 30 teams, 32 teams?
Yeah.
Is it that many? So it's 32 teams and you got 60 players per roster.
Yeah.
Something like that. So there are more gay men in the NFL. And so, I mean, it's just that we live in a society where, you gotta be, it's just considered one of the most manly sports. And so, nobody wants to be ostracized because they're gay, but there are more gay men in the NFL. And, I don't think, him revealing his sexual orientation is going to do anything to improve the game. I mean, he may have sold more jerseys, but it's not going to make him a better football player. It's not going to make, it's not going to change anything. It's just him being open and honest about who he is. And so I celebrate him for that. And this is my opinion. I just don't think that that's newsworthy information. Mm-hmm. I just don't. I mean, because it's, and it's definitely not sports information. I know it's a social justice thing, but I just really don't feel like individual players coming out is a big issue. Now, individual players coming out and then jumping on to some real heavy social issues. Like if he really wanted to impress me, do like Colin Kaepernick did. Put your whole career on the line. Mm-hmm. Go out to the 50-yard. Go out when they start playing the Star Spangled Banner and take a knee. Mm-hmm. And you doing that for your personal, your own personal, journey, that's good. It's great for you, but I just don't think it's newsworthy. Yeah. Sorry. all my people about that. I just don't think it's newsworthy.
No, that's I think that's a valid point. I think that's sitting in the same kind of area that I am in. When something becomes less newsworthy, then that means it's become a little bit more accepted. You don't sit there and you make news. Nobody's gonna make news because somebody got a tattoo. You know what I mean? Like that's not newsworthy. It's just something that somebody did. And so I like that. So with that same notion, talking about the church being should churches be discussing this, or is this just like, nah, we don't need to talk about this.
Well, I mean, the church needs to, I think.
Hey man, if you're thinking about how LGBTQ conflicts with the Bible, and you put that in the category of a sin, do we have to have a discussion when somebody comes up and says, hey, you know what? I'm a liar. I lie all the time. Like, does the church need to have do we need to talk about that?
We'll be talking about that all the time, because there's some lying people in the church. Some real good liars in the church. I mean, I think it is the church's response. I think the church has a responsibility because, the church is the community. It's a community of God. Like, and so, and within the community, you have to be taught how to see the world, and we got to find a way to have these conversations in our churches and within our communities. So we don't, I mean, Jesus's role was to bring everybody to God, not to ostracize people and kick people away from God. And so, you know, we got to learn how to treat each other right, you know, and whether whether you're gay, bi, lesbian, trans, that's your lifestyle. As a community of faith, we need to be able to embrace them and help them to understand and help the community embrace them. We can't change anybody's mind. That's not our role. Our role is to embrace God's people and to take the community to support the people that are within that community so they can go and do the things that they need to do. And so community builds community. So if we go off and we always just push people to the sides and we ostracize them because of how they think or how they look or how they behave, I mean, that's not the example that Jesus laid out. So
yeah, good point.
So again, it's good for the man to come out, but these are conversations that we need to have in our communities more often.
Yeah.
We don't need a big news spectacle to support somebody for being who they are.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a very good point. That's a very good perspective to have on it. We have another comment, and I know we're past our time, so we're going to wrap it up. The main issue of life is how we do treat one another. Do we treat one another with the love of Christ, or do we spend too much time criticizing each other? And that's you're right. That seems like what a lot of church folk or churches are doing. We're just spending our time trying to find each other's faults. Here's what you're doing wrong. Here's what you're doing wrong. Instead of talking about, hey, this is what you're doing right, and this is what Christ offers. So we're just trying to point out each other's faults. I think that's a very good point. I think that that's what we probably shouldn't do. But
absolutely,
I appreciate you joining us. Just to wrap it up, just for people who may, we do touch on a little bit of issues that get a little sticky. But just like in any relationship, what they say, when you're in a relationship with a spouse, the number one thing that causes a relationship to fail is the lack of communication. And when you're in a relationship with God and your relationship with a church and your relationship with the faith, you need to communicate. You need to talk. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to talk it out. A lot of times people do some listening, but they don't ever get to do any talking and have that conversation. Especially if you're not going to Bible study, which we have on Thursdays. But especially if you're not going into a Bible study, you're not really being able to have a conversation. And so that's what we continue to do here. We want to continue to have tough conversations. I appreciate you coming on, Chris, and having that tough conversation with us, stepping into some dicey little issues there, but appreciate your opinions and your thoughts. This is Impact 2021. Thank everybody for coming on here. We will be back here next week, where we will continue our conversation about the role of the church, and we will go a little deeper with some additional guests. Thank you again, Chris. Thank you for everybody who has joined us. Have a good night.